Real quick before we start this video, my last video was the first video footage of our new track and shop space, but I didn't really talk about it. In the beginning of December 2024, we finally finished some long-planned renovations to our space. The wall for our scale track got knocked down to make one big track, and our original track got turned into this beautiful pit space. If you ever find yourself in NorCal with your RC drift car, be sure to stop by Rolling Garage, where we will happily get some doors with you and provide you with all the necessary parts to keep you going on your RC drift journey. Hey everyone, today I have a brand new product on the RC drift market to show you all. If you stuck around until the end of my last video, you'll have caught a glimpse of it already. Brand new from Japanese drift manufacturer Reve D is the successor to the highly recommended RSST programmable drift servo, the RSST Pro. These new Pro servos are clad in nice colored aluminum, black, red, and purple, but it's not just a flashy new look. There's also some new programmable settings to get into, so let's take a look. Out of the box we have the servo and some instructions. It mentions some Futaba and Sanwa settings. We'll take a look at those in a second. These new Pro servos work off the same USB programmer as the original RSST, so if you already have one of these for the old servo, you won't need to buy any new programmers for the Pro. Comparing to the old servo, we still have a 25-tooth spline, but it looks like the casing is a bit lower profile than the old servo, which is good news for people using the YD2ZX or other systems, which the odd sizing on the original RSST made fitment difficult, so I'm glad the RSST Pro is the standard low-profile servo size now. I have our quarter balance scales out, so let's take a look at the weight of the new servo. It looks like both servos weigh about the same. Even though the Pro comes in a full aluminum case, the nice chamfers keep the weight down. Loading up this new RSST version 2.1 software, we see we have a new look compared to the original RSST program, with an option to choose RSST or RSST Pro. So with the servo plugged in, I'm going to choose the Pro. Right away we see a lot of new settings compared to the old servo, and we'll get into those in a sec. Up in the top left we see this basic, Futaba, and Sanwa setting. These are preset settings available for users with Futaba and Sanwa remotes, and a basic factory setting. If we click on each, you can see the base setting set change. I started off trying the Futaba setting since I'm using a 10px. Referring to the included instruction manual, I set my Revox on curve 3 with my gain at 55%. Also worth mentioning is that my BEC output voltage on my Brev is set at 7.4 volts. If you decide to use a setting from someone else, take it with a grain of salt because there's so many underlying settings that you may not have gotten from them, such as BEC output, gyro gain, endpoints, and many others that can heavily affect how your car handles. With the servo plugged into the car, we can hear some initial noise coming from the servo. Don't worry too much about this. It's normal among pretty much all RSSTs I've seen, even the original one. Takahiro from Reve D addressed this in his Japanese blog. Initially, this setting was a bit too responsive for me with my channel 3 endpoints left at 100. For the Sanwa settings at least, Takahiro recommends turning up the channel 3 endpoints if it's not stable enough for you, and I usually turn these up anyway, so I turn them up to the max on the 10px, which is 140. After I did this, the car felt more stable and I could really experience the settings for Futaba. Surprisingly, I didn't really feel the need to change any settings right away. Of course, this can heavily depend on your remote use, your chassis, and your gyro, but this is why I decided to keep my RDX fully in the Reve D ecosystem of equipment. The Futaba preset worked pretty well as a base setting for my RDX with the Revox gyro, using the recommended settings in the instructions. Now I'm going to go back with these endpoint settings and try the basic factory setting. This setting is okay. I think the Futaba setting felt a bit snappier and quicker than the basic setting, but either seemed like good starting points when paired with the Revox so far. I was about to say I'm not going to try the Sanwa setting because I don't have one, but I do. It's just really old, but I'll try it for the sake of this video. Looks pretty cool though, huh? Like I mentioned, Takahiro stated on older Sanwa remotes, you can turn the channel 3 endpoints up a bit to around 115 to make it more controllable, so my channel 3 endpoints are at 115. My gain is at 60 like recommended in the servo instructions, but I left the Revox curve at 3 from the previous settings. Even on an over 10-year-old remote, this still feels pretty drivable. I think Reve D nailed the preset settings on this servo and will help a lot of people get going with a decent bass when paired with a RevOx. With the preset settings out of the way, I'm going to briefly go over all the individual tunable settings. Takahiro's video was great, and who better to explain the settings than a representative of the manufacturer, but I'm going to run through these and try to explain them for you so you can make adjustments to yours if you feel you need them. The RSST is capable of adjusting the center point of the servo separate from any trim or sub-trim, so this setting is useful if you need to adjust your servo horn without having to use any trims in the remote. Torque is the holding force of the servo. Increasing torque will make the steering feel stronger and stable and will let the car hold angle with a feeling of grip. Lowering torque will let the front end feel a bit lighter and move quicker. The next three settings are new settings for the Pro Servo. Initial torque can be used to control the torque and grip in the first part of the steering. A low initial torque will allow the car to turn in easier initially. A high initial torque will make it more difficult to get the front end to move on initiation. Mid-torque adjusts the torque amount after initiation during the countersteer. A higher mid-torque will allow the car to cut to the inside with more grip. Lower will reduce front grip after the countersteer and let the car carve a bigger radius to the outside of the turn. The last new setting is max torque. It adjusts the torque at full countersteer like an aggressive initiation. Higher max torque and the front will want to straighten back out faster after getting into angle. Lower max torque will want to hold the higher angle for longer after getting into the high angle drift. Torque curve gives the ability to change the amount of grip during the countersteer in the middle of drifting a corner by changing the torque level in the servo while drifting. For example, if you like to drift to the outside of the corner, set the curve lower to keep the torque feeling the same through the whole corner, but if you like to turn into the inside of the corner during the countersteer, raise the curve to increase the torque during the drift. This setting is shared among many programmable drift servos. I talked about damper in my Futaba servo video and will probably be overviewing several other settings that are similar to those I talked about in that video. Damper is used to combat hunting or gyro shake. If you experience hunting, increase this setting and it will slow the servo speed that I found translates into making your initial turn in and transitions a bit quicker. Use caution when raising damper extremely as it can cause more heat in the servo. Damper point is the range in the steering that the damper operates. A higher damper point will activate the damper sooner. This will let the steering feel a bit more stable and heavy. A lower damper point will make the car feel lighter and more responsive to the steering, and a lower damper point can also reduce hunting. The speed curve will adjust how fast the countersteer from the gyro initiates. When the speed curve is lower, the countersteer comes slower, but it is easier to steer the car mid-drift. When you raise the speed curve, the steering will hit max countersteer faster, causing the front to pull towards the outside of the turn, and it can be more difficult to rotate the car more aggressively through the turn. This setting controls the power output to the servo, affecting speed, torque, and response. Increase for higher speed, more torque, and increased response. A higher setting will increase the load on the servo, so use caution. Frequency on the servo is similar to how frequency on, say, an ESC works, since the servo is just a motor after all. Increase for a smoother and milder feeling in the steering. Decrease for a rougher, more aggressive feel. Deadband is the response for the servo for inputs of the wheel around the center point as you widen or narrow a dead spot in the steering. Decrease to make small inputs translate to the steering. Increase to make those inputs larger in order to move the servo. Takahiro mentioned before that frequency and deadband may be best left at factory setting, so you may not be messing with these settings as often as the others. The direction setting is used to basically reverse the servo operating direction. Typically, I've found on the RSST that channel 1 needs to be reversed to correct the steering direction, so reverse this setting if you need to fix that. Now that I covered all the settings, I want to compare to the old RSST that many are probably still using and see how it fares against the new RSST Pro. We're going to do all factory settings. I'm going to put the original RSST into RevOx mode settings for my RevOx gyro, and the Pro I'm going to use the base Futaba setting. I'm leaving my gain at 55 on curve 3 for both. I have the standard RSST installed on the stock RevOx preset settings in the USB program. This combo feels pretty quick and responsive, almost a bit too snappy on the initial steering. I didn't have a recommended gain or curve for this setting, so I just left them at what I mentioned for testing. It's still drivable for me, but I have to be careful not to be too aggressive or all over rotate. This servo is also probably almost 2 years old now, so I'm not sure if the performance is comparable to a brand new RSST. Now I switch back to the RSST Pro with the Futaba settings. This setup feels a bit more stable and tame than the old RSST did, but in certain sections of the track, the initial turn-in response feels comparable to the old servo. With all the new settings, I'm sure you can get it dialed into your preference, and I'm going to start adjusting all the settings once I finish with this video. Overall, I think the new Reve D RSST Pro is a great servo for the pro user or even someone newer to RC drifting looking to get more into electronics tuning. The preset settings give a really good baseline to start off of or go back to if you get lost in tuning. Hopefully this video gives you a better understanding of the RSST settings. If you have any questions, be sure to drop them in the comments section. I'll leave links to everything down in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to the Rolling Garage channel for more content like this, and I'll see you all in the next video.
Coco, look at Mitch. Say, pop it. Look at Mitch.